Sometimes it feels like the plants are out to get us. And when you think about it, they kind of are. For a plant, or from a plant's point of view, they're stuck in one place. Once that seed starts growing and that first root starts to come out of the seed, that's really where that plant is going to be stuck for the rest of its life. Now, if we're talking about something like a saguaro cactus or an oak tree, we're talking about hundreds of years. If we're talking about something like a redwood, we're talking about potentially thousands of years. So, from a plant's point of view, they have to have defense mechanisms in order to protect themselves from the world around them. They don't necessarily know where they're going to end up to grow, but they know that there are going to be things that want to eat them, want to attack them, and want to get them. So this is why we have the chapter on poisonous and allergen plants, is because we as humans need to know which kind of plants really truly are out to get us. We need to know the mechanism, how those plants are going to affect us. The part of the plant that is the most toxic or the most poisonous can cause the most amount of damage. And then those plants that are also going to cause allergic responses. Now remember back in chapter 2 when we talked about the plant cell. And we looked inside of the plant cell at the different crystals. Now those crystals were meant to attack insects that would be chewing on the plant. We also had those modified cells, the trichomes, that would be in the dermal tissue on the outer edge of an organ. And those trichomes also were meant to stop or irritate insects and other types of organisms that would be eating it. Now, occasionally, some of those cells can get large enough to start to annoy or dissuade herbivores like cows or deer, or even us, as we are going to learn and talk about in this chapter. So, when we look at plants that are out to get us mechanically, I think to us that makes a lot of sense. So plants will invest in some pretty dramatic structures in order to try and attack or to keep organisms from eating it. So here I have two different kinds of shrubs. And this shrub, as we can see, is producing spines. And these spines are absolutely brutal. If you've ever been hiking through the woods and one of these spines has gotten a hold of you, you will come home with some pretty ugly scrapes, tears in your clothing. It sucks. Now some plants, like this one, are not quite as dramatic in the spines that they produce. So right here, we can see one of those brutal little spines. Right down here, we can see another one. All along this entire stem, we have those modified cells that have come together to make these really brutal. And these can be just as ugly as the great big spikes that we saw on the branch over here. These can scrape, they can make the plant get stuck on us. You end up walking home with a bunch of the plant. So when you're walking through the woods, or walking through the prairie, walking through the shrubs, and you get all of these branches gripping at you and scraping you, the big question is, why does this work for the plant? Well, if you can imagine your tongue, even the toughness of a cow tongue can't handle these kinds of spikes and spines. And so, in the case of herbivores, they're not going to eat these plants. Great success strategy. Invest the energy in great big structures to irritate animals, and they won't eat you. Remember back when we talked about grasses? With the grasses, we have reed canary grass. And reed canary grass is an invasive plant in our area. It was brought over here by the Europeans as food for cows. And if you've ever been walking through a field of reed canary grass, you might have noticed that once you got through that field of reed canary grass, you had all of these like little paper cuts along your body. And that's because our reed canary grass has those trichomes. If you brush the leaf in one direction from the stem towards the tip of the blade, you won't have any problems. But if you try to put it the wrong way and go in the opposite direction, you're going to hit all of those really abrasive trichomes, and you'll get those little paper cuts. So it's no surprise that the cows won't eat this. What people have done in foraging experiments is they have turned cows loose in a field where there was nothing but reed canary grass, nothing else for them to eat. And what they found is that the cows almost went into starvation because they did not want to eat this grass. So yay, reed canary grass. Really successful strategy. Invest that energy in the dermal tissue cells to annoy herbivores, and you will survive. Now here I have a very dramatic plant. Most of the time we like to think of cacti as being the most dramatic plant in being able to get us, but I think that thistle are amazing at how much damage they can do. So the leaves are really lush, and the leaves have all of these really abrasive spikes and spines off of them. And then this plant, almost in a very sadistic way to keep causing damage, after the plant has gone dormant and the shoots above ground have dried, we are left with all of this dried, abrasive leaf structure and spines coming off of the stem, so it can keep causing damage to humans. Well, luckily for us, the thistle doesn't have that additional layer of having chemicals, so that when you brush against it, you get a chemical irritant in addition to all of the scrapes. That's where stinging nettle is so awful. It's because stinging nettle does have all of those chemicals along its trichomes that will cause damage. Another plant that is not shown here is the wild parsnip. Now, wild parsnip is also in our area as well. And what wild parsnip will do is wild parsnip has a phototoxin. So it's not going to get you mechanically. I mean, not directly. It's not going to cut and scrape you. What it's going to do is it's going to put that oil on your skin. And then when you go into the sunlight and the sunlight starts to interact with that oil, it'll cause a really awful burn and a blister. So that's pretty evil. You don't even know that you're getting attacked until later, and you're wondering where all of these blisters came from. Another plant that I love that's really aggressive is the devil's claw plant. And the reason why I love devil's claw is because this fruit, this dried dehiscent fruit that opens at maturity, this fruit has all of these modifications. And these modifications are going to scrape and scratch animals in the desert. Those scratches then become infected, so the animal is more likely to die. So when that animal dies, the devil's claw baby has lots of really good food. The other thing that can happen is you get a big patch of all of these devil's claw fruit, and they're all locked together. And if you are an animal and you walk through this, and you get these all kind of trapped around your legs and your body, it means that you're going to get slowed down. If you get slowed down, you're more likely to become prey. Either way you look at it, this plant is really successful at killing mammals in order to provide food for its baby. So if we look at it from the plant's point of view, that's very, very endearing that this plant would care so much about its kids that it would try to kill another organism to give its kids food. There are lots of different ways that plants are going to try to defend themselves. In the lecture slides, make sure that you know the plant's name, that you know the structure that's going to do the damage, and the type of damage that it will do. Now, before I move away from mechanical injury, or this outside external way of protecting yourself, if you're a plant, the final plant that I want to talk about are the poison ivy, poison oak, and poison sumac. All three of those have oils on their leaves. When those oils interact with our skin, we will get some of those blisters. But here's the thing. About 10% of the human population won't react. These are the people who could roll around in poison ivy, never have a response. They don't know what the rest of the population is talking about when those reactions are so incredibly brutal. The other thing with poison ivy and poison oak and poison sumac is for some people, for each time they get exposed, the body is going to overreact. And so each exposure gets worse and worse and worse. And for some people, the minute they get a little bit of those oils on their skin, they have to be hospitalized and start given a dosage of really high steroids and try to suppress the immune system to get that response to stop happening. Now, the big question is, why would these plants invest in those oils? Because we've got organisms like birds, like the pileated woodpecker, that can eat poison ivy berries, have no response. You would think they would get all those oils in its throat and it would be all itchy inside its throat. No. pileated woodpecker can eat those berries and have no problems. Deer can walk by poison ivy, and it's not like half an hour later they're scratching and itching and rolling all over the place. So what we see is that the plant didn't necessarily come up with these oils or start making these oils to intentionally get humans, but it sure does feel like it. We're still trying to figure out why the plant would make these oils when it doesn't seem like any other organism has quite as dramatic a response as humans do. So we're starting to ease our way into the plants that cause allergic reactions. And in order to understand allergic reactions in humans and cats and dogs, we first have to understand a little bit about the immune system. Now, the immune system is really complex. There are lots of different types of cells that have a lot of different types of interactions. There are white blood cells, many different types of those, that then make these memory cells and can make B cells and antibodies and proteins. And essentially what I'm trying to introduce you to is the idea that our immune system is hugely complex. So trying to understand allergic reactions is a very challenging thing. Most of the time we just have correlation data. We don't have strong causation because there are so many different variables that can affect things. So one person can have a really dramatic response to ragweed pollen, for instance, while another person has no response whatsoever or has a very mild response. And we can get this whole continuum of different responses to different substances that cause allergic reactions. What we do know is that in humans and cats and dogs and most mammals, there's a whole system called the lymphatic system. That lymphatic system operates separate of our cardiovascular system, but is connected. In other words, we have white blood cells that are patrolling throughout the rest of our body. They're looking for invaders, whether that's bacteria or viruses or potentially plant pollen or food proteins or whatever our immune system is recognizing as an invader and a threat and an attack on our body. Those cells are patrolling everywhere looking for those invaders. When they find them, they try to neutralize them, kill them, and then they go back to the lymph nodes. The lymph nodes are like these little houses where our white blood cells tend to hang out. They communicate with one another. It's a very dynamic system. The lymph nodes are drained by the lymphatic system, drained by the lymph fluid. Now, the only way that lymph fluid is going to move is with muscle contraction. And this is the part that kind of stinks, because if you are having an allergic reaction, if you are feeling sick, if you're feeling ill, it is important to move around, because every time those muscles contract, you are moving and pushing that lymphatic fluid. In other words, you're helping to clear the system out. You're helping to get things moving when you are encountering a lot of invaders. So think about that the next time you get ill. Note that it is important to get up and move around a little bit to get that fluid moving. It can help speed recovery. Anyways, so we've already talked a little bit about allergic responses this semester. Remember in the chapter about grasses, when we talked about celiac disease, where some people's bodies, their immune system is recognizing that gluten protein as an invader, and it ramps up the allergic response, which includes things like watery eyes and running nose and clear out the digestive system. When you think about it, what our body is doing is getting all of the liquids flowing, barfing and diarrhea, and get all the liquids flowing to try and flush that invader out. So people with celiac disease, when they eat some gluten, they get that heightened response and all of the symptoms that go along with it. This is why they have to avoid it. Remember, we talked about peanuts in the legume chapter. Some people's bodies, their immune system is going to recognize that peanut protein as being an invader, ramp up the immune system. And unfortunately, with peanuts, we can also get that response of closing the airways. And that's what makes a peanut allergy so incredibly dangerous, is that people can die from asphyxiation, not being able to breathe when their airways swell and tighten. In this chapter, the textbook talks about, of course, ragweed, which is a really common plant pollen. But there are lots of different plant pollens that can cause an allergic response. A lot of the tree pollens, some of the grass pollens, and essentially, if we remember what plant pollen is, it's those 3 cells inside of a protein capsule. That protein capsule has all kinds of shapes on the outside, so when the pollen gets inside of our nose, the proteins in our nose, those little receptors, are going to feel the shape of the proteins on the pollen, and they're going to freak out. They're going to be like, ah, no, get this out of here. Runny nose, watery eyes, try to flush the system of that pollen. But here's the thing, not everybody's got those receptors. And that's another important variable in looking at allergic responses. So some people have those receptors. They have the gene to make the receptor that's going to react and freak out, while other people do not. We're still looking into all of those genetic connections. So when we look at plants, we look for mechanical injury, we look for allergic response within the organism, and then that final category of what if you ingest the plant and there's some kind of toxic substance or a poison inside of it that could cause serious damage inside of your body. So this is where we get to talking about two of the parsley family's members, poison hemlock and water hemlock. Both of those look a lot like other members of the parsley family. So keep in mind those characteristics from the herbs and spices unit, those characteristics of the parsley family that help us to identify. You've just got to be good if you're going to be identifying parsley versus one of the poison members in that family. Now, interestingly, we're finding that poison hemlock is starting to spread in the southern states and even in southern Illinois. So I encourage you to take a closer look at the slide with both poison and water hemlock. Know what those plants look like so that when you're out hiking, when you're out in the woods, if you're out in the southern states wandering around, you know to be very careful of those plants to stay far away. Definitely don't do any foraging and eat them. That would be a very unfortunate outcome. Other plants will be plants like the milkweeds. The milkweeds are producing those glycosides that are very damaging to most organisms, except for the monarch butterfly caterpillars. What we have discovered in research is that the monarch butterfly caterpillars do suffer a little bit as a result of eating those glycosides, but for the most part they are resistant. They start to concentrate those toxins in their body, which is why the adult monarch butterfly is considered poisonous to most organisms, because those glycosides have been transferred into that adult form. Oleander, a common plant grown in landscaping down in the southern states. The yew bushes that are grown in our area and grown across many countries as common landscaping. Both of those plants have toxins that we have to be careful of. Now the oleander, like our poison oak, poison ivy, poison sumac, can have those compounds volatilize and become airborne if we start to burn them. Once those chemicals become airborne, we can breathe them in and still get a response inside of our body that is very damaging and very deadly. So when we're looking at plants, we've got to look at the different mechanisms that they can cause damage and cause problems. When you're going through the lecture slides, make sure you know the plant, the part of the body, or the part of the plant body that contains the toxins or could be problematic, and what that toxin is, how it is going to cause some damage. As always, if you have any questions, please email me, and just make sure that you sleep well when sleeping next to your plants. Hopefully they really don't try to get you in the middle of the night.